Shalom, brothers and sisters, and welcome to another edition of Maccabeestv. Today we're beginning a series that I call the Library Challenge. The reason for the series is because it has been said falsely that Israelites don't read books outside of the Bible, which is a lie, emphatically a lie. And when we read the Bible and we understand prophecy, for example, when you read Daniel's the 11th chapter, except you go outside the Bible and know history, you will never have the understanding of a book like Daniel's the 11th chapter in the Bible. So it is imperative for you to read sources outside the Bible to validate the Bible itself as a true book. When you read the book of Daniel's the 11th chapter, that's going into the Syrian wars, the Ptolemaic and Seleucid wars, where they were fighting against each other in that book. So now, in order to prove those prophecies to be true, you must go into books and sources outside the Bible. So I decided to let you brothers and sisters into my home to see some of the books that I read in order to make certain statements that you hear me make when I'm teaching. I get a lot of inboxes from brothers and sisters asking me what book should you get, what's good to read, so forth and so on. So I'm just going to show you a few selections from my library. For the purposes of time, I'm not going to show you every single book that I have in my library, obviously, because I have a lot. I have hundreds. But I'm going to show you some books that I use in order to teach. Okay, so let's get right down into it. First, let's turn off the TV, because this is something that a lot of our people don't do. A lot of our people don't take the time to actually turn the television set off and read. That's something that's missing amongst our people, which is why the youth really don't have any knowledge, because they don't read books. All they want to do is play video games, and all they want to do is, listen to videos and be on Facebook and social media. But sometimes you have to read to feed your mind. Let's get right down into it. Right? The name of this book is called Jewish Life in the Middle Ages. For those of you that don't know, the Middle Ages extend approximately from 193 AD to about 1453 AD. And this is Jewish life in the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages is generally synonymous with Europe, right? So this is about the Jews in Europe, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into this book and we're going to see what we find. I'm just going to show you one reference real quick. There's a lot of good stuff in this book. When you turn this book to page 70, right, and I hold it up, right, see this guy right here? He's black. This is a black man. And he's holding what? He's holding a Torah in his hand. And this image is dated from the 1400s. The 1400s. This is a black man, right? Now, if you look right here, it says figure 99. You can see that right there. You probably can't see it on the camera. Maybe you can, maybe you cannot. It says figure 99. Again, you can see that this is a Jew, a so-called Jew, an Israelite, a black man holding a Torah. Now, when you come over to this next page, the corresponding page down here at the bottom, right, it actually tells you the date, the dating of this picture. And you're going to find out when you read this book, the dating of this picture is from the 1400s. Guys, a lot of you guys, they hate the Bible. When you speak about the history of the Bible, you are in error 9 out of 10 times. You don't know what you're talking about. I already proved that with Polite when I went into the thing about the demonology, and I already proved that with Shaka when I showed him to be a liar about King James being a homosexual. But let's move on. Very familiar book to the family, right? A lot of y'all have heard about this. There shouldn't be too many Israelites or black people in general that are not familiar with this book, right? This book is called Nature Knows No Color Line. This is a part of my library. But I want to show you, brothers and sisters, something very, very, very interesting, right? The woman on the front of this book, her name is Queen Charlotte Sophia. She was married to King George III. This is in the 1700s. This is after King James, the 1700s. This is a black woman. Now, some of you might say, well, first of all, this book was written by a black scholar named J. Rogers. But some of you might say, well, it's questionable. You can't really tell. The picture's in black and white. So we don't really know if she was black or white, whatever. Okay. Now I'm going to show you, brothers and sisters, something, right? Black author, Nation Knows No Color Line. You brothers and sisters have this, right? Now I'm going to put this down just for a moment on my lap. And I'm going to grab another book. The name of this book is called Elaine Ramsay, right? Now on the front of this book is Negro repellent. Because Negroes will see this and be like, this book has nothing to do with us whatsoever. So you'll look at it and walk right past it. But scholars will pick the book up and finger through it and see what the hell is inside. Because we know white people be lying. Okay? Now, Elaine Ramsay was the painter, the personal painter for George III and his wife Charlotte Sophia. Remember this book right here? Charlotte Sophia, I said this is a black woman. J.A. Rogers put her on the front of his book because he knew she was a black woman. But watch this, right? We open this book with Negro Republic on the front, right? And we find on this page, I'm only going to show you, brothers and sisters, a couple of things because I got a lecture coming up, not too much. This is the same image that we saw on the front of J.A. Rogers' book, right? A so-called black woman named Queen Charlotte Sophia. But again, those of you that are watching will say, little questionable. She could be black, she could not be black. Watch this. When I turn a couple of pages over in the very same book, voila, black woman. Y'all see that? You see that? But you would have walked past this book on the shelf because you see white folks on the front. But if you look far enough into the book, you see that this is really a black woman. This woman right here and this woman right here is the same person. But they've been whitewashing the images ever since we fell in Europe. But I'm going to go into this more in my lecture. Interesting book. A lot of lies in here, but there's some truth in here too. Let's move on. What do we have here? You know, this book was recommended to me by Black Lotus, called Egypt Before the Pharaohs, meaning pre-dynastic Egypt, before Egypt unified under Pharaoh Narmer. Interesting stuff in here. You know, I've heard Kemetic scholars talk about the Israelites eating their babies. When they dug up some of the bones in pre-dynastic Egypt, they found teeth marks in the bones of the pre-dynastic Egyptians. And those teeth bones didn't come from animals, which suggested that there might have been some cannibalism going on in pre-dynastic Egypt, but I'll leave that for another time. Let's move on, right? Of course, what Israelite doesn't have a Torah? You guys say we don't read Hebrew. Well, I got a Torah in Hebrew and in English, and I can read it. I'm just saying. Let's move on. This is a secret weapon. The only other person that knows I have this book is Tazariah. But now I'm putting all you brothers and sisters onto this information. This is a source-rich book. And what this book goes into, it goes into all the information that I brought out when I brought out and showed that King James is not a homosexual. This author gives us all the sources from during the time of King James that exonerate him. Okay? This is a great book. You can get this book on Amazon.com. And he gives you a lot of contemporaries, meaning people who lived during the time of King James. Unlike Anthony Weldon, which most modern scholars quote, which is where that lie comes about him being a homosexual, we have contemporaries who actually were still in the king's court that were writing not only about the king not being a homosexual, but they were also writing about the fact that Anthony Weldon was an enemy to the crown and he was an evil man, and they spoke evil about him. And a lot of the sources are in this book. This book will lead you to a whole bunch of other books that I have that I'm going to probably show you some of them, but not all of them. Great book. The only person that has this book besides me is Tazariah. I advise a lot of brothers and sisters to go out and get this book, man. Very good book. Let's move on. People say that there's no archaeology that backs up the Bible. There's no records of the Israelite anywhere in history. This is a good book to start with. A lot of stuff in here. I won't go too much into it. I'm just showing you brothers and sisters books that I read. This is a good book, all right? Understanding the Bible through history and archaeology. And what I want you brothers and sisters to see, right, as I go through my history book section, you're going to notice that I'm not one-dimensional. I got books on Europe. I got books on ancient world. I got books on Kemetic. I got books on all types of stuff. I don't just read one thing. Okay? Science. The name of this book is called That Their Words May Be Used Against Them. And what this book is these are quotes from evolutionists that are useful for people who believe in creationism. In other words, the Most High, through his son Christ and the angels, created all that we see in the world, right? We can use these quotes in this book, and there are hundreds of them from evolutionists, and show how a lot of the stuff that they teach is felonious. Very good book, amongst many science books that I got, but this is very good, right? Something that you brothers and sisters probably should invest in. It's not very expensive, all right? Ivan Ben Sertibus, African presence in early Europe, showing that black people were the founders of a lot of the countries that we see today in Europe. Very good book. We were there from the very beginning in Europe, okay? I'm glossing past certain things because I know that some of these books you brothers and sisters are familiar with, so there's not really much for me to say. The name of this book is called Lost Tribes in the Promised Land. I see a lot of brothers and sisters posting, screenshots of this from Amazon.com. This book goes on Amazon.com anywhere from $250 to $5,000. Very expensive and very rare. But because I've been in the truth over 2 decades, I got this book when it first came out and it cost me about 18 bucks. But now it goes for anywhere from $200 to $5,000 because the information is very, very potent in this book. And there's a lot of information proving that the people that were over here in the Americas, the indigenous people, they were Israelites. That's in this book, right? And they were calling on the name of the Most High too. They knew the Most High's name and all that. Very good book on slavery, Before the Mayflower. Very, very good book on slavery. It takes us from the time that we were in Africa all the way through the time that we were in what was happening in the West Indies, what was happening in Haiti, what was happening in Santo Domingo, what was happening in the Americas, all the way up through the Civil Rights Movement, all the way up until today. Very good book. I'm telling you that some of the stuff that you read in here about slavery, specifically the Middle Passage, is just when the Most High put those curses on Israel, it was serious. In this book, it tells you that they were throwing so many dead bodies of slaves overboard that were dying during the Middle Passage over here, that the sharks followed the ships from Africa over here because there was so much food, so many dead bodies they were throwing in the water. That's how many of us was dying, man. So it goes into all that stuff in this book, a lot of stuff. The Haitian Revolution, all that stuff. Very good book. I hear a lot of brothers and sisters talking about the Council of Nicaea. Well, I have a book about the Council of Nicaea. And I'm just going to go on and say this on record. It would behoove brothers and sisters to actually study on the subject a little bit more. The story of Jesus Christ, the A.O.C, was not created at the Council of Nicaea. It was not. That's all I'm going to say on that for now. Great book. I want to give a big shout out to my brother Morey Yeshaya Yisrael, aka Kashub the Danite. This brother actually gave me this book, The Ancient Near East, Volume 1, an anthology of texts and pictures. So there's a lot of ancient texts that are recorded in here that we can read about. And this is a very good book that you can use as a primary source showing the antiquity of the Israelites in ancient times. What was written by external sources, meaning outside of Israel, what the other nations wrote about us is in this book. A very good book, right? Because people say that that doesn't exist, but it actually does, all right? The name of this book, and some of my books are so old they don't have covers on them. So I'm going to read you this, and hopefully you can see it on camera. The name of the book is called The Origin of the Anglo-Saxon Race. The majority of our people, when they hear the word Anglo-Saxon, the first thing that comes to their mind is white people. But if you understood linguistics, the word Anglo means angel, and the word Saxons means sons of Isaac. So the Anglo-Saxons were the angelic sons of Isaac. And who was the angelic son of Isaac? Jacob and his sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. You're going to find out that the ancient Anglo-Saxons were black people. Now, I kind of went into this on the tail end of my lecture about King James not being a homosexual. I kind of did pull some references on this. If you haven't seen that video, you can go to the brother Ready for R on YouTube, the channel Ready, the number 4R, and you can pull up that video with Hashar and myself, and you'll see at the very tail end of that video, I actually pull some information out this book about the Anglo-Saxons being actually black people first, and the white man eventually took over that name and started calling himself an Anglo-Saxon, but he's not. The original Anglo-Saxons are us, right? Very good book, all right? And by the way, amongst my camp, and I'll do this for brothers and sisters at home as well, if you get any of the books that I recommend, right, I can send you the pages. If you don't have time, a lot of these books you can see are very, very thick, long reads. Nowadays we don't have time, especially if you have a wife, family, a job, so forth and so on. If you just need the most important parts of the book, or you don't have time to read, I've had a long time to read a lot of these books. So I can tell you some of the good parts of the book to read. All right. Let's see what we have here. When Scotland was Jewish. This will be a part of my presentation. And in this book, this book goes into how the ancient Scots, the black people, the most famous Scottish family from which the Stuart family intermarried was a family called the Douglas family. They're black people. That's mentioned in this book. We'll go into that another time. In my lecture, I'm going to go into this heavy. The Basilicon Doron. What is the Basilicon Doron? The Basilicon Doron is a primary source. This was written by King James himself. And in this book, he gives his son instructions on what to do when he became king of England after him. His son was Charles I. And one of the things that we pulled out of this book was the fact that he instructed his son never to forgive people that were homosexual. That's a primary source. So while one hater named Anthony Weldon was calling King James a homosexual, he was writing instructions to his son, telling his son never to forgive the sin or the crime. He called it a crime of being a homosexual. And you will notice that those people that purport that King James is a homosexual will never mention this book. America's Last King. This is going into, again, George III, who was married to Queen Charlotte Sophia, which I showed y'all was a black woman, right? Very good book. And there's a nice little piece of information that I'm going to pull out of here in my lecture. But a very good book if you're interested in early American history. Got to be eclectic with the information. Big up to my brother Zion Lex. I have to show you, brothers and sisters, that I also support Hebrew scholars. This book was called It's Written and Engraved, written by the brother Zion Lex, a very, very good young upcoming scholar. If you brothers and sisters don't have this, I advise you to get it. All right? This is a two-part series written by a so-called white man named Rabbi Marvin S. Antleman. The book is called To Eliminate the Opiates. And what this book goes into, amongst other things, it shows you the interrelationship between the Illuminati, Nazism, the so-called white man that calls himself a Jew, communism, so forth and so on, how they're all interrelated and they were all created to basically be destructive and destroy the Bible. Judaism, whether it's Reform Judaism, whether it's conservative Judaism, whether it's Orthodox Judaism, Judaism was created. And it was created. Those branches of Judaism were created. And the purpose of them was to take people away from the scriptures, to create that doubt in the validity of the scriptures. Did Moses exist? Did Abraham exist? Was there really an Exodus? So forth and so on. That was carefully crafted over hundreds of years by the founders of Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, and Orthodox Judaism. And it is being carried on today by devils like Israel Finkelstein in his book, The Bible Unearthed. But we understand the conspiracy. Yes, there is a conspiracy. Pursuant to the book of Psalms, the 2nd chapter, pursuant to the book of Psalms 83, there's a conspiracy to keep the Israelites away from their nationality. And this guy goes into that. Now, he's talking about the so-called white man that calls himself a Jew. But we understand the so-called white man is not a Jew. So the information is good, but what you have to do is you have to apply that information to us because we are the real Jews. So this is a very good book, very interesting. This is probably one of the most powerful books I have, and it is very cheap. The name of the book is called The Evolution Handbook. And I single-handedly use this book because I remember, I'm going to say names, I don't care. I remember the brother Ankh, another scholar, right? He was talking to us about the morphs and how you had the light morphs and the brown morphs, and there was natural selection going on, so forth and so on. So when I heard that, I went into this little book right here. And this book details the study, as I went into on the lecture that I gave, which is on Maccabeestv, where I showed how that was not natural selection. It was just basically the Industrial Revolution that was going on at that time. And that's why you had some morphs more than others, because predators were able to spot some morphs and not others. And that's why you had that there was no evolution, no natural selection going on. There is a lot of good information in this little itty bitty book. And this book is less than $10, right? Look into it. Let's see. I saw my brother Zion Lex quote quote this book, or actually show this book on Amazon, on Facebook. He showed this book, so I went out and I got it and actually read it. Very good book, right? It goes into the Ugarit and a whole bunch of other stuff in here. Very, very good book. The name of the book is called Extinct Languages. Very good. If you're into linguistics, this is good. Here we go, right here. Egyptian Religion by Sir Wallace Budge. I like this book. You know why I like this book? Because those of you in the Kemetic community, you like to say the Egyptians were not religious, and I'm telling you that you're a damn liar. You're lying. Now here's the deal. We can have a discussion about whether the Necher were expressions of nature or not. That's a separate argument. We can have that discussion. But the question on the table is, whether or not the Necher were expressions of nature, did the everyday Egyptians, starting with the Nisutes, did they practice religion that was formed around those so-called expressions of nature? And the answer is emphatically yes. The Egyptians were religious as hell. I'm going to leave it at that. If you haven't read this book, good book. Okay? By Sir Wallace Budge, who they always like to quote. Y'all so polite talk about this book at the Exodus, the Kemetic trial. He held this book up and didn't go into it. At the Exodus Memorial, I went into this book and showed him to be a liar. This book is not King James endorsing demonology. I went into this before. Get yourself a copy. It's less than $20. This book is showing you the difficulties that he was having with the witches. He was trying to understand them. Because one of the things that they were doing was they was trying to kill him. And he was participating in the witch trials. He was actually a participant. So this book goes into his experience as he participated in the trials where they were basically killing a lot of witches for practicing witchcraft in England. Rightfully so, because they were trying to kill him himself, right? Anyway, enough of that. I go on for days. Let's go into these two right here. Ancient and Modern Britons. Now, I had one scholar, I'm going to leave him nameless, that told me that when you go to the bookstore, this book is off in another section by itself because the author was out of his mind, David McRitchie, right? But, as I said before, right, David McRitchie wasn't the only person that said what is not the only person that said what he said. When you read this book that was written 100 years ago, called The Origin of the Anglo-Saxons, it says the same thing that David McRitchie said. Our law tells us in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. These are so-called white men that are actually being honest, that went back and did research on the Anglo-Saxons, that went back and did research on the British, and realized that the original Anglo-Saxons and the original British are black people. And that line is the line from which you get the Stuart family or King James, who gave us the King James 1611. These are facts. These things are not up for discussion. These are facts, and I'm going to prove it. By the way, there's a difference between the British and the English. I want brothers and sisters to understand that. The word British means man of the covenant. The word Ish means man. The word Brit means covenant. Man of the covenant. Who were the men of the covenant? The Israelites. The English were the so-called white people that were trying to depose the British, which was us, that was ruling England. These are facts. I'm going to go into it in my lecture. Okay? And these are some of the sources I'm going to use. Right? Now, when you read this book that I went into a little earlier, called Nature Knows No Color Line by J.A. Rogers, right? You find the book. Bear with me 1 second. Here we go. I went into this book earlier, Nature Knows No Color Line. So let's just find something real simple, right? When you go into this book, you see the coats of arms of the families that were ruling in Europe, right? I'll go into it another time. Not really that important, right? Now, these are copies from this book right here, the original source. This is an authoritative book. It's called Fairborn's Crests of the Families of Great Britain and Ireland. A lot of stuff that's in here, J.A. Rogers researched it and put it in here. But I have the original. And you're going to find out again that when you go into this book, the crests of the families of Britain and Ireland are black. Because we were ruling, and the so-called white man has done an excellent job since the late 1700s to now of trying to sanitize or whitewash that history But he didn't do a good enough job because Negroes like me were able to go out and find this information. Okay? Great book. For all you Nuwabians out there, I got your holy tablets. I told y'all that I used to be into that Nuwabian garbage. I got your holy tablets. So when you tell me that I don't know what's in here and I'm bugging out and everything like that, okay, we'll see. I'm waiting. And I got this. This is a comic book. I got this. This is a comic book. Okay? I told you, we read everything. I thought Israelites don't read. I got this. This is also a comic book. Let's keep going. Good book. Good book. Endorsed by secular scientists, Darwin's Doubts. Good book. That's all I'm going to say on that. I got to speed it up a little bit. The Secrets of the Jesuit Order. Christopher Columbus was a Jesuit. They knew they wasn't going to India. They knew they was coming. They was looking for the lost tribes of Israel. Good book. Babylon and Timbuktu. Do I got to say much? You already know what that is. Malcolm X's 5 greatest speeches. See, we read everything. I thought we didn't read books. Good book. Y'all see the title, The Ancient Black Hebrews. Okay, Forensic Proof. Good book. Big up Nasi Yashuvel. Recommended me this book, The Science of God. Good book. A lot of information. Learned a lot from reading it. And this one I'm going to keep to myself because I got a lecture coming up. So I'm not telling y'all what this is. I'm going to hold this. All right, I'm going to hold it. Good book. If you into textual criticism, good book. There's a difference between the Textus Receptus, the Septuagint, and the Alexandrian, the Textus Receptus, the Septuagint, and the Alexandrian manuscripts. Some manuscripts of the Bible are corrupt. There's a long, winding history. In the future, I plan on going into this in depth. Westcott and Hort were an intricate part in using the corrupt text, which is basically being proliferated around the world today. That's why you have so many different versions of the Bible. Westcott and Hort were instrumental in this. So you should know. Epic of Man, early history. I'm not saying, I wouldn't even really recommend you brothers and sisters get this. I got it because it's old and there is a few things in here that I use. Like it goes into the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. And this is a source that I use to show that the original Greeks were black. They were not Israelites. They were not Hebrew Israelites, right? They were actually what you call today Japhetic people. The original inhabitants of Europe were black, were dark-skinned people. They were the sons of Japheth, and they were dark. You have the Minoans, you have the Mycenaeans, so forth and so on. And this book goes into that a little bit. I'm not really saying brothers and sisters should get it, but this is a source that I use because a lot of people think that the original inhabitants, when Japheth went up into Europe, they think that those people originally were white. They were not. They were dark. All the sons of Noah originally were dark. That's a fact. But, you know, I'll save that for another time. God's Graves and Scholars by C.W. Serum. Good book. Goes into a lot of scholastic stuff, history. A lot of stuff in here about Kemet and Egypt as well. Good book. Okay? So, oh yeah, let me just big another brother up too. I want to big up the brother Morey Shai Yisrael. This is an early copy. His book is now out and it's finished, but this is one of the first copies of the brother's book when he compiled it. And he thought enough of me, so I got to give that brother a lot of credit. He thought enough of me as a historian or as somebody that reads a lot that he wanted my input, you know what I'm saying, as far as reading his book in the early stages. So I want to big this brother up. You can reach this brother on Facebook, Kashub Danite, and this book is actually finished and it's very good, all right? So now what I want you brothers and sisters to do, right, is because for the purpose of keeping space in my house, I do not have all my books with me, right? So I'm going to invite you brothers and sisters along with me. I'm going to get dressed and I'm going to go to a storage facility that I have where the remainder or the majority of my library is, okay? So come along with me.